with that, I'll hand it over to him. And if he's not going to talk, well, whatever.
Thank you, Jody. And you know, thank you for having me. Whenever I first saw the posting, sometimes when I look at a posting, I say to myself, that looks interesting, and I don't apply immediately. I wait a day or two because I want to see how do I feel about it tomorrow, you know. And I also like to go over it a couple of times, like what are some of the unsaid things within that text. But from what I could tell with that posting, this position would focus on affordable housing, and I usually throw air quotes around affordable because like outside of Tornado Alley in like Mississippi and Louisiana, I don't know where there is affordable housing in this country right now. And I've lived everywhere from the Southwest, Northwest, Plains, Upper Midwest to New England, okay? I have not lived in the Southeast yet, and I kind of hate humidity and heat, so I'm probably not gonna wind up there. And that'll be a blessing. But whenever I first reached out to Jody, you know, I write this cover letter, and there too, I might not send an application if I sit down to write the cover letter, and I find myself contriving. Back to that word, right? Contriving. If I have to start making stuff up to try to convince you to hire me, and it doesn't feel truthful in here, I might not apply. Actually, I'm probably not. At this point, I'm not going to apply. But that one was easy for me. I have experience with homelessness, you know, personal. Some of you may have read my piece on my mom. You know, that hits really close to home. It has caused me endless sleepless nights, endless worry. But I was like this close to being homeless myself. My son and I, we moved to Vermont. We'd lived in Vermont before. We moved to Vermont after I graduated from SIU with a master's degree. And before I got that degree, I worked for the Chronicle in Barton. And after I got the degree, I went right back to the Chronicle because I missed journalism. And my degrees are in playwriting, by the way. We wound up in a little bit of trouble because my son started to get in trouble at school. And at some point, the administrator said to me, if he doesn't straighten out, we're going to have to expel him. And I said, you know, obviously I hope you don't do that for my son's benefit, but even more so, if you expel him, there's no other school in this area for me to send him to. So if you expel him, we're going to have to move unless I accept that he's a ninth grade dropout and encourage it by not moving. They said, you know, we appreciate your perspective, but that's out of our hands. Things move forward, right? Things spin a little bit out of control. I'm trying my damnedest with him. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I'm doing my damnedest with him. But I keep getting the notes, right? I keep getting the calls, and then finally one day they call and they say, hey, you've got to come pick your son up. And I said, okay, no problem. I'd been preparing for it at that point. I drive to pick him up. By the way, I'm working at the courthouse in Newport, Vermont, which is 45 minutes north of St. Johnsbury. So I had 45 minutes to think about not only, oh my goodness, my son is being expelled from high school, but also, guess what? You're going to be moving soon, unexpectedly. Even then, this is 2019, right on the cusp of 2020. We had no idea that the pandemic was going to happen. We had no idea that the pandemic housing crunch was going to happen. And I got a preview of it before it all befell the rest of the country. I looked for housing in the area, and I did find something, thanks to my editor. She said, you know, David, we've got this gentleman who has a house that's been split into 2 apartments. It's right around the corner from the office. We think you'd like it. And it's only $500 a month. And I said, oh, like, did I just wind up in a better place I was before all of this stuff happened? Get into the apartment, and yeah, no, I did not. There was no hot water. I don't know if any of you ever been to Vermont before, let alone Vermont in December. Yeah, it's negative 30 outside for weeks at a time, and I was taking cold showers. My son, on the other hand, he did not want to go to the school in the area, and thus led a long conversation with multiple family members. He decides to go to Tucson, and I stay in Vermont, you know, I'm in heaven, right? I've still got a job as a journalist, and I'm taking ice cold showers when it's negative 30 outside. And you know, by the way, the heater doesn't work properly. The thermostat thinks it's always colder than it actually is, so it runs nonstop. The heat runs nonstop. Again, if you've never lived in Vermont, you might not know that they have oil tanks there, and that's how they fuel the heat. So you've got an oil tank, you know, that provides the heat, and then you have some forced air thing blowing it into the apartment. Those oil tanks cost about $1,000 to fill, and depending upon how warm you like it, I don't like it very warm, I like it a little cooler. I could make that thing stretch at another house for maybe a month or two. Long winter, 6 months, 7 months, right? At this place, it was running out every couple of weeks.
Oh.
Yeah. And so my son's in Tucson, right? And he's sending me pictures. He's happy. He's warm, right? It's like 70 degrees outside. And I'm taking cold showers and wondering why the heat won't turn off. And also at the same time, the newspaper I was working for is just like newspapers today. They're dealing with budget stuff. And they were saying to me, in essence, you either have to accept that you're going to be the next editor, and we'll start training you immediately, or we're going to have to let you go for someone who will step in and be the editor. I have always been resistant to being an editor. I'm not an editor. I don't enjoy editing. I'm good at writing. I'm good at self-editing, but I don't want to edit your work. I don't want to edit your work. Nothing to do with you. It's just not my thing. But also, you know, there too, I'm a full-time single dad, and as editors know, you're going to be in the newsroom a long time. Like every day, you're going to be there for many, many hours. I could not do that. I had a son to take care of, and I knew right then and there, I don't know where I'm going to go, but I'm going to have to go. Thus led this, you know, this long trip across America. You know, I went home. Tucson is my original home, but I've lived all over the country, as mentioned. When I got home, I had to rent rooms. I rented a room in a mansion. I rented 2 rooms in a small house owned by an old woman who said, you can rent these 2 rooms, right? And she was, I don't know what her deal was. She wanted $450 for those 2 rooms in Tucson. But we had to share the kitchen. In both of those places, I found myself going, why am I here? This isn't working. I got to get out of here. I got to get a home, right? I got to get my own home again. And this is now, the pandemic is happening, right? We're getting the news reports. Hey, if you don't have to go anywhere, you probably shouldn't. Every time you go to the store, Walmart, grocery store, when you get home, use Clorox wipes and wipe off all your stuff. And I'm sitting there going, well, I worked at a hospital when I was in my 20s. I kind of obsessed with diseases when I was in school. I don't really understand why a respiratory infection is going to make us have to wipe down our stuff that we buy from the store, right? Usually with respiratory infections, you got to breathe them in. So there I was already kind of, my gears were turning. But you know, the housing situation, year after year, worse and worse, right? And I got this opportunity to go report in St. George, Utah. You're probably wondering, this is horse betting. This is the future of journalism on horse betting. I got this wonderful opportunity to report in St. George, Utah. And within a week of arriving, I'm looking for a place already because I've rented a room at a resort. I had to throw quotes on that one because it's basically it's a studio apartment, right? Just you don't get a stove. It's a studio apartment, no stove. $1,700 a month. As soon as I got there, I'm like, I have to get out of here now, right? And that introduced me to the pandemic housing market because as I'm looking for places to live, I apply for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhome, okay? And as I'm talking to the person on the phone, asking questions about it, she says to me at some point, you know, I have a partner, and she says, are you 2 married? And I said, no. And she said, okay. And she didn't like elaborate. She just said, okay. And she's probably scribbling something, right? And towards the end of the call, I say, okay, so how much do you need from us to move in? How much do you need from us to move in? And she says, 7,000, and I forget the last couple of numbers, right? It's like 7,000, it was over 7,500. okay? Let's just say $7,650. And I kind of paused, and I went from citizen looking for home to journalist getting ready to report a story. I said, you need to tell me if we want to move into your townhome, I need to give you $7,650. She says, yes. And I said, why? Break that down for me. And she says, well, we need first, last, and a security deposit, right? The rent at that time for that apartment was $1,500. So already that's $4,500. But by the way, since you and your partner are not married, we're going to need security deposit times 2. And I'm, oh, okay, very interesting. We had a dog at the time, and she says, right, and there you go too, right? You have a dog? Oh, that's another $1,000. And oh, by the way, you have a dog, there's pet rent on this place, $50 a month, right? And gosh, by the time she was finished talking, I was just like, yeah, no, I'm definitely not calling you back to figure out if I can rent your place, but I'm absolutely calling you back for a story. Give me a couple weeks, right? And that's really how I got into reporting on housing. I mean, in Vermont, at the Chronicle, I did reports on housing. I did reports on homeless folk. I did reports on criminal justice. And you find that like they overlap, right? In many areas they overlap, and a lot of times they feed into one another. I reported in St. George on homelessness 2.5, 3 years. And it just keeps getting worse, you know? It just keeps getting worse. At some point, we finally moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was working as a freelancer there. And when we got there, oh, it's so much better. Like instead of paying $1,500 a month for a dumpy little 2-bedroom apartment, we can get a dumpy house in the middle of downtown for $1,200. It's kind of funny, right? But here's the trick. Like, we didn't have to share a wall with noisy neighbors anymore. So even though it was still a dumpy house, and oh, the stench that came out of that basement in the summers, I don't even know how to describe it to you. It was like, you know, it smelled like something had died, but there were other things present, you know. And I looked in there every morning, like, why does it smell like this? What do I have to do? Little break though from like the crazy rental market, the hot rental markets, right? And you know, long story short, I told you I wouldn't do a whole lot of talking, and here I am, right? Then I saw this job, and Jody offered it to me, and you know, do you remember how long did I take time to think it over, Jody? Did I say, can you give me X amount of days to think it over? No? I feel like I might have asked her for a week, right? Maybe she offered it to me on Monday, and I might have said, can I talk with my partner and get back with you in 7 days? During that time, one would think that I would totally, like, I would investigate every aspect of the rental market, right? Right? I did what was available to me, right? A few property management companies, a few Craigslist entries, but the trick is, I found something on Craigslist that I knew that I could afford, at least for the time being, and I said to myself, but I'll only be there for a month or two, right? Just like my beautiful resort accommodations in St. George. Again, long story short, I'm still there. It's a basement apartment. I love the people I live with, but I'm 45, and like basement apartments, they haven't been for me for a very long time. Yeah, I love you, and I can continue to love you, but like if I hear your footsteps at you know 5:30 in the morning and they wake me up, like I'm probably not going to be too happy. I'm not going to take it personal, but I am going to be looking at the situation, and I'm going to be asking myself, why are you still here? And in this case, the short answer is, it's too fucking expensive. Because that $7,000 thing that happened in St. George 5 years ago, it's happening here right now. If I wanted to move into a place of my own, they want the lease, right? But they also want first, last, security. I don't have a dog anymore, but I've got a parrot. You'd be surprised how many people are like, oh, you have a parrot? We don't even consider that a pet. That's not even something that's on our radar as a pet. Wonderful. But doesn't change the fact that I still got to pay first, last, security, right? And I just don't have it. Especially when you take into account I'm a freelancer, right? And I'm going to have a big tax bill at the end of the year. No matter how much money I spend on food, clothing, I guess I could go buy a camera. I could go buy a camera and a lens or 3, And I would like that very much. That would make me very happy. But the IRS won't get it, but I also won't get it, you know? Because I don't make money as a journalist strictly through photography. I generally make it by going and reporting things. And a lot of times they say, well, we also want you to take pictures. But I'm very blessed in this role, particularly because I've got a pro that I collaborate with named Joe. So he focuses on the images, I focus on the reporting, right? Which brings us to, well, why are we here? I was going to play this George Carlin thing, but gosh, do we only have 30 minutes? Is that what we're looking at right now? Or are we going to go to 2:30 because we 2:30? All right.
Second.
I'm going to play this George Carlin clip just because first of all, I love it, but also I wonder, like, how did he know this stuff? How did he know everything I was going to be dealing with 10, 20 years after his set? You know, because he sums it up just so succinctly. Okay. Can you hit those lights over there? There's lights over there somewhere. Thank you. Okay. And whoever made this clip, they like, it's not as succinct as I would like it to be. Let me just make sure that we are where I want to start.
Countries. I hate to be repetitious, but God, we are a warlike lot, you know? We
Yeah.
can't stand not to be fucking with somebody. We couldn't wait for that Cold War to be over, could we? Just couldn't wait for that Cold War to be over so we can go and play with our toys in the sand. Go play with our toys in the sand. And while we're not invading some sovereign nation or setting it on fire from the air, which is more fun, then we're usually declaring war on something here at home. Do you ever notice that? We love to do that, don't we? We love to declare war on things here in America. Anything we don't like about ourselves, we have to declare war on it. Don't do anything about it. We just declare war on it. We got a war. It's the only metaphor we have in our public discourse for solving a problem. It's called declaring a war. Got a war on poverty, the war on crime, war on litter, the war on cancer, the war on drugs. But you ever notice there's no war on homelessness, is there? Nah, no war on homelessness. You know why? There's no money in that problem. There's no money in that problem. Nobody stands. It's true. Nobody stands to get rich off of that problem. You could find a solution to homelessness where the corporate swine and the politicians could steal a couple $1 million each. You'd see the streets of America begin to clear up pretty goddamn quick. I'll guarantee you that. I will guarantee you that. Yeah. So, I got an idea for homelessness. You know what they ought to do? You know what they ought to do? Give the homeless their own magazine. Give them their own magazine. It would make them feel better for one thing. That's a sure sign of making it in this country. Every group in this country that makes it and arrives at a certain level has its own magazine. You have Working Mother magazine, Black Up.
We're going to leave off there. I could keep going, and he does actually offer a solution. For anyone who's seen this clip before, he does offer a solution. But he just said the two things that I need, right? The first one is, we're never going to solve this problem because no one can get rich off of it. I just want to ask y'all, journalists, right, well-informed citizens, we just made a step towards solving the problem. July 24th, what is it? President Trump released an executive order saying, in essence, that we're going to begin doing civil commitment again. If you're on the streets and you're deemed, criminal, your mental health issues are something you can't manage on your own, they're paving the way to pick you up and stuff you away somewhere. I don't know about y'all, but I'm scared. I'm scared out of my mind over that. Like I said, my mom dealt with homeless. She was on the street for 2 years. My mom has a mental illness. And you know what's even funnier? Even sadder? My mom likes Trump. She likes Trump. Yeah. So when I have this conversation with her, and by the way, I'll be damned if I let a president ruin my relationship with someone I love. Yeah. I do not attack her, and I don't aggressively argue with the things that she says, but I do have good conversations with her about what Mr. Trump is doing and how it could impact her, how it could impact me, her grandson, my son, everyone we know. right? And this point particularly, I said to her, she said, well, he's gonna clean up the streets, right? We're gonna get these criminals off the streets. And I said, Mom, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but if that program was up and running and in full swing, which, I mean, we've seen the ICE raids, right? You got to wonder, is this program going to look like ICE handling migrants, right? I said, I hate to think about it because he might have picked you up. He might have put you in one of these institutions. But, I mean, there too, right? I don't know how many of you have covered mental health issues, mental health in general. Anytime you're dealing with serious mental health, the big problem we have is we don't have enough space, we don't have enough beds. Why don't we have enough beds? We don't have enough professionals who can help these folk. We can't hire them fast enough, we can't train them fast enough, they don't exist. So there's another question, right? What the hell are you going to do? You're going to clean up the streets, you're going to send all these folks to institutions. Which institutions? What are they going to look like? Where are they going to be? Who's going to staff them? I'm just using my imagination right here, maybe projecting a little bit. But, I'm from Arizona. How many of you are familiar with Sheriff Arpaio's tent cities? Right? I'm kind of thinking that's what we're looking at. I'm kind of thinking that's where we're going to go with this. And yeah, we're not going to have people who can provide the therapy that will help these folk, right? We're going to have something that resembles a corrections officer, but probably without the extensive training, because even corrections officers have to go through an academy, right? The other thing that Carlin just said is give them a magazine. To my knowledge, they didn't have a magazine yet. I am aware of certain programs, right? There's a paper in Denver. I forget the name of it, but the writers are often homeless folk, and a lot of times they're reporting on their communities. They're doing profiles of people that they know. They're writing about things that impact those communities. But I kind of like to think of what Jody and I are doing and what Joe Klein and I are doing. The three of us, we're like this 3-person magazine for the homeless. I've got a background in everything from features to investigative work. When I was younger and I was working with different editors, I used to think you couldn't marry the two. Now that's all I want to do. All I want to do is investigative work that also marries strong narrative storytelling. And part of the reason is, as we do these, especially these profiles, we're introducing you to your neighbors that you probably won't talk to otherwise. You walk past them, they might... Say again?
That's right.
Yeah. We walk past them, sometimes they're panhandling, sometimes they're just there, sometimes they're sleeping, right, in conspicuous places. We don't talk to them. If y'all are familiar with the little kerfuffle that's happening around Franklin and 5th right now, they just put up, Central Oregon Villages just put up 4 of those tiny homes, and there are people in the neighborhood that are very pissed off about it. Right? There are people in the neighborhood that are not happy about this. Well, what do they say? What's their problem? Well, these folks are criminals. They're drug users. We have kids. We have kids in this neighborhood. Think about the kids.
They're not good neighbors.
They're not good neighbors. They're noisy, right? The people they bring, they're problematic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I went to 2 of these meetings that they held, one at noon on a Tuesday, the other at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, specifically for the neighbors to come talk to them. I saw 2 neighbors, one at each meeting, and I made a point of getting to those folks and asking them why they were there. Trouble is, they both support the thing. So I did not get right. I'm already building a story that shows the pro side, which is obviously the Central Oregon Villages folks. The mayor and the mayor pro tem were there. They're in support of it. Police officers were there to let the concerned neighbors know, oh, by the way, when people come into this thing, the crime numbers in the neighborhood, they don't spike. In fact, they don't move at all. Why? Because in this case, it's a high barrier shelter. Does anyone know what the difference between high barrier or low barrier shelters?
High barrier has rules.
Yeah, and specifically in this case, background checks and drug tests. You have to submit to drug tests. The third thing, though, about the kids, the people that are going to move into this particular shelter, their families. Single mothers, single fathers, right? And then there are a number of other familiar configurations that they'll accept. He talks about NIMBYs at some point in this, right? And that's what's happening over there. And that's what happens anytime you say, we're going to open up this shelter. We're going to put some resource here for homeless folk. Then a lot of people get really pissed off and they show up in numbers and they shout, they get angry, right? And they say, what about the kids? What about the kids? What about our property values? And of course, the great irony there is, trust me, nothing's going to happen to your property values. Not here, not now. It's just not going to happen, and it's not going to happen for a while. So I kind of like to think of us as the magazine for the homeless folk. I do a mixture of, again, investigative and or accountability, but also profiles. You know, I'm always looking for, again, I'm looking for ways to tell stories that are investigative in nature, but also introduce us to the individuals, the people in our neighborhoods, the people that really need help, right? These are the most vulnerable people in our society. I know that there's strong arguments for, well, some of them, they don't want to have a home, they don't want to work, and so on and so forth. I've been here for 9 months at this point. I've spoken to hundreds of these individuals. The ones that fall into that category, the I don't want to work, I don't want to pay shit, I don't want to be part of the economy, minuscule. A fraction of a fraction. Everybody else is going, I feel defeated, I don't know why society hates me. And as we were just talking about, right, nobody pays attention to me. So by the time I show up to do a story on them, a lot of them, they want to talk because they're just thrilled that someone's paying attention to them and someone's not judging them. Someone's going to sit across from them and listen to their story. So that's one of the services I provide, and it's specifically for those folks. But I do it in service of the broader public, right? To introduce you to your neighbors you don't know, maybe you wouldn't know otherwise. We do this to dispel the myths, right? To help people understand homelessness, to help people understand homeless people, and also to help folks realize it's a community problem and it needs to be solved collectively. Because if we leave it to the government, as we're seeing at least with this administration, their ideas for solving it include incarceration, right? What amounts to incarceration. I mean, if you can be panhandling on a street corner and the police can jump out of a vehicle with masks on and disappear you, and I know it hasn't happened yet, and it may not happen, and I'm praying it doesn't happen. I'm praying I'm wrong. But the evidence so far shows that, and I mean, it still happens, like we get something new from this administration every day, right? They just deployed the National Guard to Washington, D.C. to help the local police. Like, are you kidding me? Right, help. I could go on, but I'm going to stop here because I've already used half an hour doing this. I told you I wasn't going to do a lot of this. May I have you all? I've got 4 prompts here, but it looks like we've only got enough for. No. This guy, you're going to join us, sir.
I will.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to say the 3 of you, the 3 of you, and the 3 of you. Will you be groups, please?
Yes.
Very good. And we're gonna do some role playing, right? In each group, I need an editor, I need a reporter, and I need a photographer. Good. And you're just pretending, and no one's gonna press you about your skills or your resume. So just whichever role feels right, please take it.
I have to be man and stand up.
Okay.
Take one.
Everybody does.
Take one? All right. I'll be a photographer then.
Okay, Joe.
I'm not
Please take one.
a photographer.
I was really counting on having 4 groups.
Yes.
I'm from LeGrand.
Okay, so I know you all want to read it and dive right in, and that's good. If I could have just a minute. So these are prompts, right? I've got 5 of them up here. We only have 3 groups, so we're just going to work with what we've got. Each of you has a phase in the process, and you've got prompts that ask you to discuss with your group. How do you do this, right? And a lot of the questions, they're prescriptive. I wrote them. Certainly, if you have other questions or concerns, please add them to the mix. Mine are not meant to be, They're not meant to be comprehensive, so if you have other questions, add them to the mix and we can all talk about them in about, let's say 10 minutes. Can everyone work this stuff out in 10 minutes? And there's no right or wrong.
A lot of times it's what I've heard.
Can we share?
To get like their own self-defense training, to be like given the tools.
That's okay. I mean, y'all's is a little, because you have the one come up with questions, right?
Yeah, I definitely have to, because I don't want to go.
Yep. I don't expect anyone to have a fully finished product, right? The idea, these are just cut.
I wrote 1,500 words.
Okay, well, I'll take that too. I'll take that. It's extra credit. No, but we're starting dialogues, right? Not only with your groups, but with me and with the whole group. So let's go ahead and start working through it. Who got the idea of pre-reporting?
I think we were the pre-recording
Yeah.
people.
Okay. And what's the first prompt there?
What makes a good profile subject?
What'd y'all come up with?
Well,
Something people can relate to.
Yeah, okay.
When
Oof.
for the listener,
I got to stop you there, though. A lot of these homeless folk, it's hard to relate to them. Real hard.
True,
Yeah.
and the reporter or the interviewer needs to find something to reach out to their audience, so the audience says, gosh, that could be me.
Yeah. So how can we simplify that? Connect to audience connection?
Know your audience.
Know your audience. Yeah. Okay. Good.
As the reporter in this, one of the biggest things is finding somebody who's really willing to open up
Yep.
and give access.
Wonderful.
And the other thing we talked about is the balance between someone who is both representative of kind of the larger issues here, but also not someone who just clicks the stereotypes. Like, is it someone who reinforces? Is it someone who's representative or someone who's an exception?
Okay.
And it's kind of the balance there. So there are some surprises or something that challenges stereotypes.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all wonderful. Gosh, and that's just the first. That's just a good profile, and I want to.
Just wait.
Yeah.
No.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, I know. So here's the trick, right? I hesitate to even do something like this because I don't want to stand here and tell you I know best and I'm going to tell you how to do it, right? I'm not into that as a teacher. I'm not into that as a learner. But at the same time, like I've done a bunch of these profiles at this point, and I've asked myself these questions. These are the questions that I wrestle with on a daily basis. Relatables, it's tricky. I've met folks who are relatable, right? But at some point during the interview, they reveal that they're on meth right now. You know, we did a profile on a person who is a transgender person, but also a convicted rapist. How do we relate to a convicted rapist, right? And I had to sit across from this person and you know, we're gonna get to like the interview portion, and I hate to jump ahead, but you have to be prepared to ask folks really hard questions. And in doing so, the trick of the trade is to ask them, can you tell me more about this? Do you feel comfortable talking about that, right? How much of this sensitive thing are you willing to share with us? And you know that I'm going to publish this, and what I tell them always is I'm interested in the good, the bad, and the ugly because I'm trying to present a flesh and blood human being. The trick is that rapist, they are relatable, but only in some instances. And the moment an audience member reads, oh, this person's a convicted rapist, that's why we got all those nasty comments on social media, right? Oh, see, this is why they're homeless, and these are the people you want to help, and da-da-da-da-da-da. But our convicted rapist, what she said to me was, I did 20 years in prison for that crime. I paid my debt to society. why am I still persecuted? Anyone who's interested in the quandaries that come with justice, that's $1 million question. Why does our society want to punish people beyond the punishment that justice metes out? And is it right or wrong? And you do 20 years in prison, you're already going to have a hard time getting a job. You're already going to have a hard time applying and getting approved for an apartment, right? Because you can't just say, yeah, I've never been convicted of a crime. Well, you have. And it's one that when people read it, they're going to think twice about offering you an apartment. Knowing your audience, that's great stuff. A lot of times on this beat, your audience becomes the folks you're writing about, but also the service providers, the volunteers. And that's a beautiful thing because they care deeply about this stuff. And if you serve that audience well, they will shower you with love and praise.
They will also shower you with leads to other individuals.
Yes, and we're gonna. That's one of your questions, right? That's another question that's coming up, and that's like my first. Like anytime you think, oh well, how do we find these folks, right? Is that the next question? How do we find these folks?
Yeah, that is the next question, but I have a question.
Yes, please.
Which is, I think understanding a good profile subject and purpose, understanding what you're trying to accomplish with your profile. So
Yeah.
if you're doing one profile, as opposed to like a series of profiles, or I don't know. I guess I would, your example of the convicted rapist. I think as if I were the editor, I'd have a question about why are we profiling this person?
Yeah.
What are we accomplishing with a profile of this exact person
Yeah.
versus some other person?
And if they're one of 20 or 25, that's one thing, but if it's the only one you're going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I also want to push a little bit about knowing
Here,
the audience.
And but let me. So with that woman particularly, we were dealing with convicted felons, but also transgender people. Both of those populations are underserved in housing, and they both experience discrimination at higher rates than anybody else. So that's why we had to get her. But she's also one of many. I've done about 20 of these profiles at this point, and she's one, but there's a bunch of other folks.
Yeah, I was going to push back on that same thing. So
Yeah, please.
Make that
Yeah, please.
The audience, I think it has to be more than one thing.
Yeah.
It is for the people you're profiling and for that community. But if part of our job is to tweak places where changes can happen.
Yeah.
And to educate.
And to educate, yeah.
Yep.
The people who have the power to make changes probably are not the people you're writing about.
Right.
So you need to also find a way, and this is part of the reason profiles are so difficult. You need to find a way to make that unignorable. English is my second language. Unignorable. Is there a word that says that?
Unignorable.
There is now.
Yeah.
Now there is.
Must read news.
Must read news.
Yeah.
For the people who may be in positions to actually make things happen.
But not only them, but your general, if you're a community newspaper, educating the community so that they are not pejoratively focused on folks who are homeless and actually can coalesce change to be made by forcing those people in power to do the right thing.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like if you are writing a piece and you are focused on, you mentioned something about being showered with praise and love. Like if you are writing a piece with one person's or even one group of people's response in mind, like that's a red flag. You need to catch yourself as a writer and think about, you can't write for one person or one group of people, I don't think.
As a journalist.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of fiction writers, they write for one specific person.
That's different.
Yeah. All of that makes sense, and it's all good, and it's stuff we're all wrestling with. Anyone who's on this beat, you're wrestling with all of that stuff. In my case in particular, when we talk about the people in power, right, I'm also doing accountability and investigative stuff, and the people in power wind up in those stories. They don't wind up in the profile so often. Though, whenever I ask myself, well, how do I make this profile timely, right? You don't always have control over who you're going to profile. We meet, how do you find them, right? We meet service providers who like our work, who support what we do, and they introduce us to people that they believe are willing to share their stories, and then we go interview those folks. And we oftentimes have to get in. We've got one visit, a lot of times. Just because once you leave, you don't know if you're ever going to find them again. You don't know if you're going to be able to reach them by phone. So I have to go in there and earn their trust really quickly. And one of the ways that I do that is I share tidbits about myself, kind of like how I did with you all when you came in, right? I shared with you my own experiences with homelessness, which are deeply personal. I do the same thing with the folks that I profile, that I interview. Not as a show of, look at me, I'm just like you, but rather you're about to share sensitive stuff with me, so I'm going to do the same with you. But not too much, right? I'm not going to share too much. Just like I don't want to write to please some group of people, I also don't want to make my profile subjects think that I'm their best friend. By the time we get to step 4, we're actually not going to have time. But step 4 and step 5, you can see what happens when that goes awry. I want to keep talking about this, but we've only got like 7 minutes. So how to find, I'm just going to make that one quick, and I don't mean to bowl over. Service providers, they're the best.
Yeah. Right.
I can tell you from personal experience, if you go out into the streets and you meet these people where they are by yourself, and you say, I'm a reporter, I'm here to write a story on you, they're going to say, thank you, but yeah, exactly. Get the fuck out of here. Like, I'm trying to get money for food. Like, I'm not interested in talking to you. You get introduced to a service provider or a volunteer who's got truck with those people, they will open up to you. Best way to do it. But also, you want to plug into the community, right? You want to be a part of the community. Whatever beat you're covering, you want to be part of that community. You want to show up at every meeting, whether people expect you to or not. You want to be present. You don't want to miss a thing. And when you do that, you'll connect with people, and they'll recognize you, and they'll read your stuff, and they'll share tips with you. They'll also give you critiques that are some okay, some great, some not so good. And some you're going to be like, I don't ever want to see this person or talk to them again in the rest of my life. What's the third one?
How do you earn their trust?
And I've already touched upon that, right? You have to, if you're going to ask them to get personal with you, you've got to be willing to get personal with them. The best way to do that is to ask yourself before you even show up, what am I willing to share with these folks? What am I willing to share with a stranger? Because I got to tell you, I'm on social media, but only for professional purposes. I don't share anything personal on social media. I'm a very private person. So when I go meet these folks, and I do make that, and when I meet you all, right, and I tell you about my mom and my son, and huge leap for me. I don't ever do it on social media. Next step. What's step 2? Reporting. Gosh, I really should have shut up. I really should have, 20 minutes, I should have just shut up. What's the first question in reporting?
Where to conduct interview.
Oh gosh. What'd you come up with?
We had a couple options, but like warming shelters or service providers where people can come in and they're already comfortable coming into that space.
Yep.
Also meeting people where they are, if you have those connections and you've hooked up with the service providers and they have taken you out, that could also be an option.
Yep.
Any kind of public space.
Yes, you every point I was going to make, you hit it right on the head. You want to meet them where they are. Do not go out into the woods by yourself to meet a group of homeless folk. None of you. None of you. No matter how tough you think you are, take somebody. Okay? If you're a reporter, take a photographer. If you're a photographer, take a reporter or take another photographer. If you're a professor doing research, you know the drill, right? Take someone. Absolutely. The trick is, a lot of these folks, they're not dangerous. A lot of them are not dangerous. I've been doing this here in this community for 8 or 9 months at this point. Not once have I felt threatened. Where's the wood? Right? That's a function of how I carry myself and how I interact with these folks. I've also been lucky in that, a lot of them they're wrestling with mental illnesses of various sorts. They haven't had a hard break or an episode around me, but I can sense it. You can sense something going on beneath the surface. And therefore, some of them, they might get unruly, right? They might become threatening. It's almost never personal, right? A lot of times they're dealing with something that you can't see, that you can't understand. And if they do get aggressive, then what do you do? That's a question.
Disengage.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to want to get out of there, right? I mean, if you're in the woods, if you're in the desert, if you're downtown in an alley or something, get back onto the main road ASAP. What's the next question under reporting?
What do you ask?
See, and this is one of my favorite ones, right? Because I've worked with hundreds of editors at this point. Some editors, they say, this is what the story is, this is what it's about, here are the questions that I want you to ask. When I was a cub, I said, great, thank you so much. You just took a lot of work off of my plate. 12 years later, I want to hear the questions that are important to you, but you got to leave me room to be present. Because in my experience, reporting, you can either decide what the story is before you go out into the field, and you can say, okay, I'm going to report this story, and you can go find the things that support that story. But what you're going to find is they're not always there. And sometimes you're going to have to contrive, you're going to have to make shit up in order to make that kind of process work. I can't tell you, though, how many times I've done that. Not the making stuff up, right? Not the contriving. But I will go, I'll hold on real tight to the idea, to the main thrust of the story. And then I'll write the thing and I'll turn it in and it'll be wooden. It'll have no life to it. And I'll say, gosh, what happened? Well, what happened is you reported it like it had already happened. Like the story was a foregone conclusion. You have to find this balance between what story are we looking for, and then you get out into the field, right? It's kind of like a boxer. Anyone ever heard that famous Mike Tyson quote? Was it Mike Tyson? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? Yeah, you do that as a reporter too. You plan, you train, you go out, you say this is what the story is. But if you discover something more interesting, more troubling, more worthy of your time and space, you got to pursue it. Yes, sir.
I have something that I've come up with over the years, and that is I try to ask as few questions as possible.
Yeah.
So that I can instead say things like, could you tell me about?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Open-ended questions.
tell me more.
Yep.
Or,
Follow-up questions.
yeah, so
Yep.
the asking questions are to establish facts. And then you can go back and say, tell me more about that A thing that happened that led to B.
Yeah.
And that often, it also empowers people to then, as you say, the story goes where they are.
Yes.
I have to be careful, you still have to have parameters, that's the balance.
Right,
Like,
right.
It can't be like a ramble. But,
Well, how many folks have I interviewed are nephews of Howard Hughes? They will go down those paths, and some of them are worth exploring, and some of them are not. And that's, you got to be alive, right? You got to be here in the now. When they start telling me stuff like that, sometimes I don't cut them off. I'm not rude. I'll let them come to a resting point. They have to, right? We're all humans. We have to breathe. They'll come to a resting point, and I'll kind of steer the interview back in a direction, so we don't get too far afield. Yeah, that's right. What else have we got after what to ask?
You may only have what's not what you need.
Yeah. So this one's super important, right back to, you might only have one visit with these folks. You have to have art. Hence, right, if you're a reporter, take a photographer with you. Let them photograph the subject while you're talking to them. There might be a sit-down interview, and with a photographer present, I think that he'll second this. He doesn't want to take the picture of him just sitting there. He wants this guy to get up and do something. So what I like to do, I'll have a 10, 15, 20-minute conversation with just the two of us sitting there, and he can make some practice shots, right? See what the light's like, see what this guy looks on how he looks on camera. Do we want to take him from the right, or do we want to take him from the left, right? Which side is his beautiful side? But then I'll say, well, you were working before we got here. What were you doing? Can you go back to that? Can you do that? You were raking, you were cleaning, you were cooking, et cetera, et cetera. And then boom, you can get them right back to doing something. And then you keep your photographer friend happy. And he brings back good art, and now you've got a kick-ass story. You
We
know?
also thought it was important to get permission for the photographs.
Oh yeah,
Especially like, are they comfortable being photographed? Are they comfortable with their face in the photograph? Because especially online, like things live forever now.
right.
And they don't like people don't necessarily want their face tied to a story on homelessness all the time,
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
So like,
So
what
I-
are they
I-
comfortable
I
with?
have to talk as a photographer here for a second. If you want to do a profile,
Yeah.
that's the first question I'm going to ask. Will this person be photographed? If
Right.
not, don't bother bringing me.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a portrait of somebody whose face I can't show.
Right.
Probably. Like, there are exceptions, but they're a small fraction.
Yep.
Second, sometimes a photographer doesn't work until the writer gets out of the way. So my work often starts when the writer is left. Not always, but because as soon as the writer is there, then what you're photographing is an interaction with the writer. And if we're then say, we'll go back to work, then why don't you make dinner? We'll be the audience. Like it gets weird, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and again, it depends, we talked about this too, like what level of intimacy are we looking for?
Yep.
And in many of these cases, for me as a photographer, a portrait is the last resort. Now, there are people who make portraits that are out of this world. Most of us, the intimate photography happens once people have trusted us enough, so they kind of forget we're there.
It's
Yep.
also a matter of your relationship. So like if you give somebody an out right at the beginning before you know them, like are you comfortable bearing your soul and being photographed with your face? Like they might say no, but if you
That's-
spend some time with them and then before you leave, talk to them about it,
Yeah.
they say yes. So you can kind of just shoot yourself in the foot by like bringing it up right off the bat.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying to do
Yeah.
it at the start, but
Yeah.
before you actually get the photo, because
Yeah.
like, the worst thing is when you get the wonderful photo and then they're like, oh no, you can't use that.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
it's too
I
late.
hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, someone who teaches young journalists, here's one of the
Fortunately,
things
when I
that
got it on the
happens that
computer, it didn't turn out.
that young people do. I'd like to do a story about you, but it's probably going to be terrible, and it's going to be online, and everyone's going to
It'll live
harass you, and it's going to live forever. And we might really make you look terrible. Is that okay?
Right.
You know, don't lead with hate.
So there are two scenarios, right, that we deal with primarily. One of them is a service provider will take me to a camp, and I'll meet the people who are willing to talk. And as I'm going around I'm not even reporting at this point. I'm just introducing myself to people. I'm giving them samples. I'm saying this is what we do. This is why we do it, right? Because we're not doing it's not poverty porn, right? I'm not just trying to air your laundry out in public. I'm trying to educate the community on what you're facing, what kinds of problems you're facing, and how can we help, right? That's like the underlying goal in all of it. Whenever I do it that way, I always do a phone call after that. I'll do like a 30, 45-minute phone call where I get all the biographical stuff. And then I'll set up an in-person appointment where I take the photographer with me. And I say, and during that conversation, the phone conversation, I'll say, is it okay if I bring my photographer during the next visit? Or will you meet the photographer, are you willing to just have your picture taken, and can the photographer focus on you? And I'll just kind of hang back and shut up, right? In contrast to how I am up here running my mouth as a reporter, I'm much quieter. I do ask questions, I am in control of the interview, but I'm always, always happy to shut up. The more I can get you to talk without talking myself, the better it's going to be, generally. And then the other option, which is, it'd probably drive you nuts, right? But now we're both going through the camp together, and we're asking people on the spot, but here's the thing, the service provider will let these folks know they're going to come on Tuesday, are you willing to talk to them? And then when we show up, they introduce us to specific people, and sometimes those specific people will have someone who says, hey, I'd be willing to share my story with you, and we might do three interviews and photo shoots all in one day.
Wow.
We've got to get the material. So I see there's some movement back here, and I don't want to hold y'all. My cards are on that board right there. Please take one. You're more than welcome to call me anytime. Send me an email. holler at me. I'm happy to talk about this stuff more, especially those of you who didn't get a chance to share your responses. If you'd like to just call me sometime or send an email, I'd be more than happy to talk it through with you. And here's the thing you guys are missing. I did this wonderful profile on this person, and then a month later they sent me a text, and the text said, "Hi, I'm going to climb to the roof of St. Charles to draw attention to the plight of me and my folks. Will you cover it?"
Oh, wow.
How the hell do you deal with that as a reporter? What are your ethical obligations? What are your journalistic ethics? What are your human ethics? I'm going to leave you all with that question. You can wrestle with it. Take my card. Let me know what you come up with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you all for coming.
And your pieces are great.
I appreciate you. Thank you.